Welcome to Blue Collar Mystics, the under-the-hood approach to the depths of human consciousness. So many mysteries, so little time, so many big words. That's why we aim to take the mystical and make it practical, usable in your everyday life. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. What happened when you started asking yourself the real questions? Like, who am I? What is this? Is it a hologram? Is this some kind of weird cosmic joke? Hey, these are the questions that we are trying to get to the bottom of as we explore the final rabbit hole together here as Blue Collar Mystics. Right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Blue Collar Mystics, where we are jangling the keys that are hanging off our hip to the universe, universal truths out there, trying to, crank down the ratchets on consciousness or whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with alliterative things and it's not working today, but we're going to talk a little bit about tarot, and I'm here joined with my friend Nim of Femme Faetale Tarot on Instagram. Nim, thank you so much for coming to talk to us a little bit today. We're going to see where this conversation goes, and anything can happen. We already talked a little bit about Mandela effects before we started getting going, but I am excited to talk to you for sure a little bit about tarot. I know that's the majority of what you're sharing is tarot stuff, and you've been doing that for, 20 years or something like that?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I've been doing tarot since I was 18, so that is 21, almost 22 years now. Wow. That I've been practicing.
That's amazing. Cool. What got you into it?
I've had the very interesting experience of being raised by a witch and a Catholic. So mysticism and the occult and spooky spirituality and stuff has always been like a pretty big part of my life. So I think I've always just been really open to receiving that kind of stuff. And when I was in college, on my 18th birthday, one of my friends who was a witch gave me my first deck. It was the Dragon Tarot, I think is what it was called. And I just immediately was like, just every single day pulling cards. I was like eating it up, and it's been a buffet that I haven't ceased eating at in that time. It's just, it constantly teaches you something new.
That is so cool. Yeah, I don't know very much about tarot, and it's not something that we've gotten the opportunity to cover yet much in this show. But I've had a few readings myself. I found it to be really helpful and insightful. And for anybody who hasn't, what would you recommend? How would you recommend they kind of start to look into tarot? What is it? Where is it from? That kind of stuff. A little background, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and this is going to be, there's more specifics that I feel like I should know better, but I believe it dates back to like 1400s, maybe late 1400s, maybe even late 1300s. I have to go back, but I believe it was, it started old. As a card. It's old, and I believe Vermont has a very strong connection to it, but it started off as like a card game for rich folks in Italy, from my understanding. And over time, it's just developed into its own thing. I think it was made more popular by the Order of the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley and the RWS writer Wade Smith deck. And it's every time I feel like I go back to look at the history of tarot, I feel like I forget it almost as soon as I read it, because I feel like it's this ever-changing thing. Like if I tap into the energy of the tarot, it's a world unto itself. Sure. And it's constantly evolving, even though it's this weird sort of paradox of being ever-changing, but also very fixed, because you have like a 78-card deck. It's a 78-card system that are all based on archetypes that haven't changed in those hundreds and hundreds of years. For the most part, there's been some tweaks here and there. So as far as like, if you're interested in getting into it for yourself, just go online or go to your nearest crystal store, bookstore, and just find whatever deck you're the most drawn to. There was this myth, I think this myth is still alive and well, that you have to be gifted your first tarot deck. Otherwise it's going to be like, cursed, or you're going to have bad luck, which is a bunch of bullshit. Like that is so just not true. But yeah, so go to a bookstore and find one that just calls to you and play with it. Open it, pull cards every day, pull cards for your friends, and see where it takes you. It's awesome.
Yeah, I like the experiential sort of approach to things. I mean, that's the best way to learn, I think, anyway, you know? And yeah, well, that's cool. Thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah, I knew it had been around a long time. And the Dragon Tarot, anything specific about that?
I just remember the Page of Cups in that deck. I don't remember too many other ones because my memory is godforsaken at this point. But I remember the Page of Cups was like this little baby dragon just hatching out of a shell. And anytime I pull the Page of Cups, I actually immediately think to that card and just how much it meant to me, which is kind of funny because the Page of Cups involves like an opening of the heart, like a new relationship or this new kind of curiosity about falling in love with something. So it definitely hooked me. I don't know what happened to it. Like so many other decks I've owned over the years. I think I had it for at least like, I want to say 5 to 6 years. It stayed with me for a long time.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah,
I
I
think
guess
I
there are a
started
lot of. Oh, go ahead.
So I'm so sorry. I think I started having like dreams about dragons too. When I was using it, like I dreamt I was a dragon. You'll find that like if you really connect with certain decks, like I don't know if it's just the way that my mind works, but I feel like the artistry or the intent that the author puts into it is going to take you places, and it's going to start working in your subconscious, which is part of the magical element of tarot. I find so fascinating. Like it's gotten to the point where if I'm having a conversation with the person who speaks tarot, I'll be like, dude, I'm having such a 9 of Swords day. Like this guy came in and 5 of Swords to my ass and blah, blah, blah. It just kind of seeps into consciousness in a really fascinating way.
No, that's really cool. I think anytime we learn something, there's kind of the first set of that is the grammar, you know, the pieces, the components, whatever those things are. And so you start to learn a new vocabulary, a different language. I love stuff like that when people can get those sort of inside things. And then I think, you know, to your point too, of like experiencing it as a whole new world, it's been around all that long. These archetypes have been around so long. Who knows how many lives we've lived and how many of those we've spent, you know, around some of these ideas. I mean, you're sort of coming up with kind of two very a witch and a Catholic. That's about as polar opposite I think as you can get, other than the like you said, like weird incantations and ritual stuff, which I think is very interesting. But I think probably a lot of the stuff has had an impact archetypally, you know, if that's a word, on us for like a really, really long time. Like a lot of the other stuff that we talk about. But I think that's really cool. I've seen a couple people even like lay out tarot cards on the Kabbalistic tree of life and kind of show the imagery and the symbology there, which I think is absolutely fascinating. But I think it's also, you know, a bit of a divination tool, I guess. Is that right?
It's been considered that for sure. It's a tool for a lot of different things, depending, I guess, on what you're looking at it for. I don't typically do future projective readings. Like that's like really the least of what I do when I'm doing tarot readings. I have a really strong background in like my own journey with therapy and trauma clearing. So I'm kind of looking more at how like if I see a client, how their consciousness is being showcased to me through the cards and how we can tap into their consciousness to kind of work through blockages or work through stories that they keep, you know, kind of cycling around that are getting in their way. The times that I have done predictive tarot, it's been a little too, it's almost too spooky. Like I freak myself out, and it takes a lot to freak me out. Like tarot is one of the most benign things in the world to me. But the couple of times I've done some, especially regarding political shit, I'm like, I'm just not doing this shit anymore. Like I'm good. And also, you know, the future is always moving. So doing a future predictive reading always has a little bit of risk to it because, you know, you have to add the caveat that if you decide to change your timeline, like if you look at this and you don't like where you're going, you can do that. Like very few things are actually destined, it feels like. So yeah, but with respect to the tree of life, like there's also, if you're trying to study alchemy, if you're trying to study like Western occultism or Hermeticism, the tarot is a fantastic tool for that, especially if you if you trust yourself to get into the Thoth deck, Aleister Crowley's deck, because that's like almost its own system. It's a deck that I use very sparingly because it's its own system, but there are so many different avenues you can walk down when you start just with one deck of cards. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's neat that there are different systems. And I love the idea of the predictive thing, nothing's certain. Nothing's certain anyway. And I think that's very freeing personally. I think that's kind of an awesome thing, because if it was like that, it would be, I don't know, it would at least seem very limiting. And
Very
I like,
limited. Some people like the limitation. Some people like that. Like it's interesting because you have a couple of different categories of people who come to get these readings. And when you have somebody who's like, if you tell somebody, hey, you're kind of in charge of your reality, like, at least 50% with how consciousness works, a lot of people don't like hearing that. They don't like things being left up to them because that's a lot of responsibility, to kind of create your life and take accountability for the things that come in and out of your life. So there are some folks who really like to have that certainty because it takes away their anxiety and they can kind of relax a little bit. Now, the funny thing is, what might actually create the positive outcome for them isn't what the cards say. It's the fact that once they hear what the cards have to say, they relax and energy can flow to them a lot more readily because they're not pushing up against reality. So I guess on that note, that kind of divination absolutely serves. It has a function. It's just a different way of getting to the same spot.
it's brilliant. No, it's kind of like a placebo. It's kind of like if you had a goal, and you were like, I need some confirmation here, and a little confirmation just makes them settle and be like, okay, cool, I can continue on with my journey and not be stressed out. No, I love that. That's a really, really good point. And yeah, it doesn't matter how, whatever works for us, I think, at least in my view, is totally fair game. That's so cool. So yeah, we were talking a little bit about the Mandela effect thing. I would love to hear. I'm so curious. I can't help but we'll jump around. We'll talk about this more as well. But I thank you so much for sharing a bit about that and giving us a little bit of background. I'm definitely getting to the point where I want to learn more about this stuff, that the tarot and the hermetic stuff too. The Thoth deck sounds pretty interesting. But yeah, we were talking a little bit about Mandela effects, and I would love to talk to you about that. I know we both kind of see things in a similar fashion, and I think it would be interesting to kind of get your take on the Mandela effects. And then you had mentioned that you had kind of a personal one that you had experienced. I'd love if you're willing to share that.
Yeah, I'm still kind of blown by this. So, the mini Mandela effect I actually experienced with somebody else. So I feel a little bit less crazy because both of us experienced it at the exact same time. But essentially, a friend came over to visit me, and she grabbed a kettlebell out of her car. And I heard her say, "Oh, I got to grab my kettlebell." And then I grabbed her suitcase. We go upstairs. I remember seeing this. I remember her walking through my living room holding this kettlebell in her hand. And the reason I remember it was because I remarked that it was a different color than a different kettlebell she had brought into my house like a week before. An hour goes by and she's like, "Hey, where's my kettlebell?" And it is nowhere to be found. I have a very small apartment. It's just a single bedroom apartment. It is nowhere. She and I are starting to feel a little crazy and a little spooked. And she goes downstairs to check to see if she left it outside. And it's just sitting in the front seat of her car. And I don't like it. I don't like it. Like I actually, my whole claim to fame on TikTok, like what got me kind of bigger on TikTok was talking about Mandela effects in the more general sense, which I still don't like because they're very uncomfortable. But to have one happen to you personally, it felt like the universe was kind of like, you paying attention, bitch? Yeah. And like it was really sort of just startling as to what they are. That's I don't know. I don't know if any of us know. I feel like there's something to be said for how timelines converge or some timelines branch off and then certain things don't make the cut or whatever in like the final edit. Like I don't totally like I'm from the Bernstein Bears timeline. I am from the cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom timeline. And I mean I will die on that hill as far especially with some of the bigger ones. The risky business one. Did you know about the risky fucking business one? This was
No, I
new
didn't
to
know
me.
about that one. No.
How do you remember risky? There's a very famous scene that they always
Yeah,
show in risky
where they
business.
slide in with the underwear
What's
and
he
the
wearing? What do you
just
remember him wearing?
like some briefs and like a white shirt, right? Like a white
Yep,
button-up
white
shirt.
shirt.
And
So
uh,
I remember. Go ahead.
no, I think that's all I remember him wearing in that scene. Like,
So I remember the white shirt. If you go online and you look up Halloween costumes for the Risky Business movie, you will see a white shirt, briefs, black Ray-Bans, and white socks.
that's right.
If you put it on now, he is wearing a mauve shirt. It is pink. It is now pink. He is not wearing sunglasses, and the shirt looks too small. Like, I remember it being really oversized and kind of baggy on him, and now it's like form-fitting and like no sunglasses.
No, that's not right. No, that's so weird. Yeah, it breaks me up. I don't understand it either. I try, to put some sort of a theory into it, and it's beyond me. I mentioned to you earlier, a friend of mine sent me this, like, how to, understand all these different dimensions. Because basically, there's an old book called Flatland that is like a fiction, but it's an allegory for not being able to perceive beyond the two-dimensional space and like the third dimensional, and then it starts to talk about the fourth dimensional, which is the passing of time, and then getting into the fifth and all of that. And basically, how my friend Tommy explained it is that there's like an infinity tree, but each of those trees has a branch, and we kind of have to travel down that branch, but there may be many different branches within that. And like you're saying, maybe like in the edit, it's like we started down this branch where he's wearing, because I remember that, sunglasses, guitar, playing guitar, that whole thing sliding in, and even all the parodies of it where people are wearing sunglasses, wearing the white button-up shirt, and it's crazy, in the white socks. You gotta slide in, but yeah, I'd never heard of that one. Some people were talking about Chick-fil-A not having a K in it, but as an Atlanta boy, I have always noticed it being there. That one, I'm from wherever it was already like that. And I think sometimes people can't help themselves but get a little bit excited, and it gets sensational, and then things carry over, and how we people are, we just get excited and all that stuff. But the Fruit of the Loom one, the Bernstein Bears, same. Like, I am from that place too, so there's some very distinct. There's some other ones too that I can't think of really off the top of my head, but there's some other ones too that are really distinct that I've been like, yeah, that's right. So it's interesting to see kind of how things morph and change in reality as we're all shifting and moving forward, and it's just crazy. It's mysterious and cool. I love that. I love that we don't know. It could be, I think it would be a lot less fun, because nobody can tell us really what reality is or what's going on here. Like, I talk to people all the time. They're like, what do you think is going on here? Is it like the demiurge, or is it a simulation, or is it, how did we get here? It's how weird to wind up in some random place without any instructions, any guides. You just kind of got to figure it out, which is wild.
Yeah, for sure. I actually made contact with a new guide about a week ago. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like all the galactic races or anything like that, but some of those guys are my home. And the one that came through claimed to be Esasani, who I'd never made contact with before. And sometimes they just drop in to like give me a download. But what they showed me about reality, at least as far as planet Earth is concerned, and what you and I consider to be 3D reality, they're like, you guys are just a giant Rubik's Cube trying to solve itself. And they find it very entertaining. And apparently that is a consensual agreement amongst us and like the collective conscious. Like, we decided to try to make a game for ourselves that was impossible, really impossible to figure out. Reality will change the second you think you start to figure it out. I've noticed this too. This happens in science all the time. The second they think they've made this huge scientific breakthrough, something comes along in another experiment that completely changes everything. So it hasn't been made a huge thing yet. There's just this little hint that with the most recent James Webb telescope discoveries, the Big Bang theory is now being called into question. This has been a theory that's been like established, like, no, this is how it fucking happened. And now the evidence that they're seeing with the way that the galaxies are forming around each other doesn't hold up. So again, like, the closer we try to get to figuring it out, the more the algorithm is going to change itself to make us keep looking and keep searching and keep getting curious and hopefully stay in a state of wonder about it, because this shit is literally magic as far as I'm concerned.
It definitely is. Well, the idea that it's 64 in a cube, like, that's That's very familiar. Everybody's got their cube. Even the cross is a cube unfolded, you know? So, you know, like that does not surprise me either. And then being in on sort of the solving of this thing, but we're part of the makeup of it. It's very fractally, and you know, there's no end to sort of and it doesn't surprise me. You know, I don't rule anything out at this point because like something like that can happen, you know, that idea of the Big Bang thing, and the alien races thing is pretty interesting to me too. I've actually been looking at a book that's like this old KGB book about alien races. I think I might read it and post it and see if.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's pretty intriguing. I mean, it just goes through Arcturians, blah blah blah. It's like a glossary of all these different, you know, species from all these different star systems and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how accurate something like that is, or may not be, but it's still pretty interesting. And there's a lot of evidence, you know, sort of supporting the Galactic Federation ideas too. I think there's probably a lot of people who just claim that, right? Like I'm from the West Side, you know what I'm saying? Like, but I mean, there does seem to be some people who are pretty damn legit who are positing some of these theories and seeing some interesting evidence that's corollary. So that's wild. And as this whole thing unfolds, I think, you know, probably my favorite philosopher is Robert Anton Wilson, and he says we get to make up the story. So for you, it might be this alien thing. For somebody else, it might be like a different experience altogether. Who even knows? But it's truly fascinating. I'll say that.
For sure. Robert Anton Wilson was like my gateway into a lot of magic, a lot of everything. That was another thing that kind of found me around the age of 18 was Ra and Alan Watts and that whole crew. To go back a little bit to what you're saying about like how wild the ET stuff is, for as woo-woo as I am, like I literally got voted to be the most likely to work for the psychic hotline in high school. Like I was already in it like decades ago. That being said, I used to think, this is so embarrassing to admit now, but I used to think that people who channeled like entities or the Pleiadians or would talk about the starseed stuff, I thought they were all full of shit. I thought the law of attraction was a load of shit too. Like I was very,
Sure, me too.
I have a, I have a couple of placements in my chart that make me a little prone to arrogance. So it's something I've had to kind of go back and reevaluate. But in 2020, I was doing a live in the Soberish Facebook group. I was just pulling cards. I was just doing like random tarot cards. And all of a sudden, something shifted and something started to happen. And I don't think the video exists anymore because I think the community closed out and became the AOD community. But I was like, I think somebody's here with me. And it ended up being my guide, Micaiah, who I work with loosely now. Like I was working with him really intensely when he first arrived, but I started channeling a being calling himself Micaiah. He claimed to be from the Orion Council. I felt like a crazy person saying this into the camera, but I also couldn't like not say it. So like this is. And some of the stuff that I was like, ask him questions. Like he's here for a Q&A. And some of the stuff that people were asking, the answers that were coming out of my mouth were never words that I had put together before. Like he was definitely using my brain to download language I already had. But the way that like he was explaining reality was never something I had thought of before. So that's when I was like, holy shit, this is real. I need to stop being so judgy and start leaning in a little bit more while still practicing discernment, because there is, unfortunately, in some of these folks who channel these ETs, a direct pipeline to some right-wing crazy stuff. The whole starseed narrative is actually kind of enmeshed with some spooky conspiracy fear-based narratives that I stay the fuck away from. And it's still true, at least in my version of reality. So after Micaiah showed up, the Arcturians showed up, then the Pleiadians showed up, and then the fucking Lyrians showed up, which is a whole bag of crazy. And I started just doing these channelings like on live streams on Instagram. And by the time I was done after a live, like it was like I'd been tripping for like 4 or 5 hours. I was completely wiped. I felt really great. I felt like refreshed. And it's really changed my life. I now offer readings from these beings. And always with the warning that they're, the way that they give advice is a little bit like no bullshit. It's not that they're not compassionate, but they'll just tell you to your face if you're being a stupid asshole. Like they really will just tell you if you're the one fucking up and here's the way out of it, but they say it with love. And it's it's always weird because that's not the way I read when I do tarot. I'm very compassionate. I'm very tapped into the emotional body of the person in front of me. That's a huge priority. But when they show up, it's like a different ball game. It's crazy.
Well, you get what you ask for. I mean, sorry about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, we all need to learn how to take criticism. It is a very difficult skill to learn, but it's incredibly valuable. I've learned, you know, because if you can't, I mean, you can have all the hustle, you can have all the motivation, you can have all those things, but if you can't take criticism, then you're not going to know if where you can improve and how you can improve. I feel like that's one of the most important things. So even though it hurts and it's not very comfortable for anybody to be that vulnerable, but you know, if you can take a minute and just allow yourself to take the feedback, it's really, really helpful. So I do recommend that for folks. Yeah, the alien stuff, you know, like it could just be just part of that story, part of that narrative. I don't really understand exactly how, because like what we're dealing with here, time being not really a real thing also. So if we could, you know, go from our flatland up to a higher view, then we would see something completely different. And who knows what the components of those things are that are playing out. Like it's like opening up a jar of those snakes that like just pop off, you know, or whatever. Like, yeah, and then maybe in some other aspect, it's a completely different story. I feel like it is all the unfolding of the self. I can't really, I think the Eastern mystics probably are the closest to what's going on. And that's just my opinion. But like, that's the fun part too, is telling that story and being able to, you know, experience that. That sounds like a pretty awesome experience that you had opening up to something. And, you know, I think it's good to be skeptical too. You know, like we talk a lot about like critical thinking and stuff on the show, because it's really easy to kind of just get sucked into to believing something that we just want to, or it's comfortable, it's satisfying, and we like it. That may not be the objective case, right? It's again kind of opening up ourselves to feedback and be like, all right, well, how can I learn from this, and how can I use this to, you know, to be more perceptive and to be, you know, a better at whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish. And I think that so there's nothing wrong with that, but shitting on people's not cool. You know, I'll just say that. It's like, you know, I think there are some people out there who are fakes, imposters, whatever. But I feel like calling you out or calling them out is not going to do anything for you either, right? Like that's just a waste of your time. Now it's just a witch hunt. And, you know, there's people out there who are just actively like trying to dox people for being fake or whatever. But then it just becomes another ad hominem attack. It's often a lot of people who are like talking about different, you know, logical fallacies and then wind up using the same ones, you know, to prove their own points. And it's like, dude, come on, you got to just trust people. I just have to, at some point, you know, you just have to trust people to figure it out for themselves, you know, like that's the whole point. It's not about making somebody like a little mini me. You know, it's about helping people with the tools that they can figure it out for themselves, right? Like you shouldn't have to stay in my thing forever. You should grow to some other thing, you know, that's more, you know, and on, right? It's a constant development. But I think that's what's really cool too about the tarot thing and a lot of the folks that you kind of help with direction. To me, that makes so much sense. And I've had a human design reading pretty recently, which was super confirming for a lot of things for me. And then I've had a couple of different astrologers in the past as well. And it was always so settling, just like you said, where I kind of had an idea. I kind of felt like I should go in a direction, but getting that confirmation just made me realize that I was hearing the right voice, and that it was, you know, okay, cool. I can let go of all that stress and strain of moving forward. Like I know it's confirmed, I can just go on. And then the more that you do that, I think the more that you can really just rely on your own intuition more and more and more, because it becomes a more distinct voice and more present.
I
in
think
time.
feeling settled is like a really good way of putting that. So I work both from home and I work at a crystal store or near a crystal store in Sedona. So Sedona is a tourist town. There's a lot of people that come there for their first time and they're trying to seek something ephemeral or seek something that they, is going to give them some sense of enlightenment or whatever. So most of my folks that come into the store are first timers. They just felt led or their girlfriend forced them to do it. Actually been attracting a lot of straight cis men into my reading space lately, which is new and wonderful. It's like it's so affirming for both the client that I'm seeing and for myself as someone with a uterus who's, I think we're all kind of, unfolding and untangling out of toxic patriarchy. So to see specifically cis men come in for their first time uh, is like a gift. It's really sacred. Like to be able to hold sacred space for the masculine in that way feels really incredible. And they'll all come in a little nervous, and when they leave, they're so much more. Their bodies relax. They're like, they start talking to me with their shoulders near their ears, and by the time we're done, they're hugging me, they're high fiving me, and they're like, "That was just exactly what I needed to hear." So tarot is less of a spooky like, I'm going to tell you something, there's a ghost behind you that you can't see. It's not like that. It's more, again, sort of just a map of your own internal world, and seeing that in front of you, especially when it's kind of channeled through somebody else, you're looking in a mirror, but you're not burdened with the task of figuring it out with all the stories of your own trauma and your own whatever getting in the way. Like you have that reflection kind of right back at you. And it seems to be, I don't know, just extremely helpful. Like I look at tarot as a healing modality at this point, just because of that.
Yeah, I love the idea of it being an internal world map. That makes a lot of sense, right? Like those archetypes, that's what we're all navigating is our inner space, right? Like, so for that, having a map, having something that we can like judge, uh, parameters by, it kind of like helps us to see ourselves a little bit. And then that's great. I'm glad that you're getting to work with people who are kind of new to a lot of these ideas. That's part of like what we're so excited about is to bring these ideas out in a practical way, but also just have like a really open conversation about it. It's like, it doesn't have to be cryptic or weird or any of that, and we can try it and maybe it doesn't work, and that's okay too, right? And so in working with some of the people and different practitioners that I've worked with, I've definitely worked my way through a lot of skepticism, but be it a shaman or be it astrology, what have you. I tend to rely on tools like the Enneagram because I've studied that, but I want to sort of correlate that to other things too, like Jung's archetypes, and then the tarot, and on, because I think probably what's going to happen in this crazy 64 cubed reality is that whatever it is that we start to explore, we're going to see those correspondences and the reflections in those things over and over and over. At least that's been my experience, which is really, really kind of cool and crazy. Yeah. And I love how you're helping people chart their own maps and get like a sense of who they are and how they fit. Cause it's like, we are like this puzzle piece that's trying to solve the puzzle, but we're in the puzzle. We don't really even,
Yep.
you don't realize that until, that's crazy.
And when you do start to realize that, the game gets a lot more fun. And I feel like it helps us look at the whole collective with a little bit more compassion and a bit more of a sense of humor. Because this is, how many mystics and writers and artists have said it for centuries. Like, this is a stage, like this is an act, this is a movie, or like, people, I do call it a simulation, just because that seems the most true based on my current reality and the trajectory that I've been on. But who's to say, really? My guides sometimes call this a big experiment. They say that this is a petri dish, that this has been where our ancestors from the future came backwards to like seed the planet with certain kinds of pick and choose DNA stuff, and just to see what would happen. And all of those sound true to me in some form or another. The fun part is deciding what you want to roll with. Like, what's the most fun for you? How do you want to see your life play out within all of those different metaphors? And go play, go have fun with it.
Yeah, I think that's cool. It's nice to have the choose your own adventure sort of choice. You know, you can go this way, that way, the other. Yeah, and those all sound like legitimate, plausible theories. You know, and that's all that they can be. They can only be theories, but
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. You know, and that's cool that we get to choose that story. So, you know, make it fun. Um, yeah, I think that's great. Um, yeah, talk a little bit about what you've been doing with your community because I think it's really cool.
So yeah, I started off professionally by through getting connected to the soberish community. Like I found Jessa Reed by air quote accident back in 2019 before the shit hit the fan and everything started going cuckoo bananas. I actually found her through Noah Lampert, who I found through Duncan Trussell, who I'd been listening to forever. So like I'm kind of coming from this lineage of you know, psychonauts and plant medicine folks and tarot readers and witchcraft, all that whole thing. The community that I'm sort of trying to build is kind of from those lineages as well. Like I have a Patreon where I've got a crew of folks. I do like weekly energy updates. I do workshops. I actually have a mentorship program. I have about like 12 students right now, which absolutely blows my mind. Like I started that program a year ago and it has just been going ever since because a bunch of people asked me to do it. So it's mostly folks that are really oriented around being mindful. Like really, my whole foundation for everything is mindfulness. Like barring every weird spiritual stuff that I kind of like dabble in, like mindfulness is the foundation, the root system. So I start with that, and then we just talk about taking control of our shit. Like, how do I take more accountability for my trauma? How do I take more accountability, not accountability for things that have happened to me from somebody else, but how I respond when I'm triggered? How do I take accountability for the way that I think about reality? So I'm basically, you know, being attracted to and attracting people who are really intent and excited to build a world for themselves where they feel more connected to spirit, where they feel more connected to themselves, their ancestors, their community, their creativity. And we're kind of just seeing where it takes us. We talk a lot about manifestation. We talk a lot about meditation and kind of spiritual honesty, just being really, really clear about where we're at in the moment and what are my thoughts doing right now? What have my thoughts been doing all week? How has that informed the reality externally in this past week? How has it affected the reality moving forward? Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like I got a little rambly there, but
No, that totally does. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more on mindfulness being the foundation. Like one of my friends, Joe Roop, he's just put out his first kind of audio kind of tape. He did like a live meditation for us when we were in Pine Top, Arizona earlier this year, and did kind of like this kind of astral thing. But he's like, you know, bringing it all to the beginnings, like no matter what, like magical rituals or any of that you're going to do, basically just bringing it back to relaxation and mindfulness, like just starting there. Like it seems so simple and foundational and fundamental, but if we don't start there, you know, then we're already off course. I like to say a lot of the time, like presence isn't the answer in itself, like to be present, but that's the way that we are able to create and use our attention, you know, as leverage for the future. Like we have to learn that regardless. And it doesn't matter what your goals are. So I love that that's the foundation. I think that's great. Can I ask what was there any sort of, I know you grew up in this household that was super interesting, a lot of different influences and symbols and all kinds of stuff. Was there a particular moment when you kind of, it came to, that you wanted to help people with this, when you wanted to work with people and help them develop their consciousness?
help people, yes, that's always been something I think I was born with. But I used to think, for as witchy and weird as I was, that the whole concept of manifestation was kind of bupkis. Like I just thought that maybe it was because the law of attraction and The Secret were being so promoted. I was like seeing the capitalist kind of shadow around it. So I think I really wanted to start helping people with their consciousness immediately after I discovered the soberish community and realized how true all this stuff was. It was actually through Noah Lampert that I started imaginal work, like Neville Goddard's manifestation techniques. And it worked like the next day, to a degree that I was literally like, this is really weird even for me. Like, I'm used to seeing synchronicities. I'm used to seeing ghosts, but this is spooky. And then it just kept working, and it kept working. And then it stopped. Well, I shouldn't say it stopped working. It felt like it stopped working when I started taking it more seriously, because initially when I went after it, I was very like, oh, let's just see what happens. This is fun.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, like, oh, cool, extra money. This is great. But then I became attached to the process. And the second that happened, the energy actually started backsliding, going the other direction for a while. And because I had, and still do, but I've worked on it a lot since then, a lot of perfectionist programming, a lot of self-worth programming that's all twisted up in there. I had a bit of a meltdown because I was seeing everybody else like killing it. They're like, I just started a business. I just found a perfect house. I just found a perfect partner. And I was like, what's wrong with me? And I had to be humbled by my guides, who finally showed some mercy to me after 2 months of this. And they were like, Nim, like, this is part of the manifestation. Like, you having to confront your ego, you having to confront these like trauma-based systems that are getting in the way of abundance is actually part of you attracting abundance. So stop being so mean to yourself and just move towards what you're so afraid of and see what happens. And that's been a process like ever since. I was around 2020, 2019, end of 2019. And then things started getting easier and more flamboyant and more magical, and things just got, I mean, I have page after page after page of like success stories of how these techniques between Neville Goddard and reality transurfing and a lot of other this stuff started oh gosh, just lost my train of thought there. That happens a lot. Anywho, that's when I wanted to start helping people, because I'm like, if I can do this, because I used to have such a low self-view, I'm like, anybody can do this. And I want to help other people realize that they've been lied to their whole lives about how reality works, because this is literally the fucking, not to sound like, rehash, but this is the secret. This is the air quote good news. This is the whole thing. This is the fucking gospel, as far as I'm concerned, is that we are divine and we have been disempowered for centuries. And now is the time to take that power back. And that's so exciting. And the level of joy and fulfillment I get from having conversations with clients about this is unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. And I was a massage therapist for 12 years, and that was also fulfilling, but in a different way. This feels bigger. This feels, I don't know, more magical. Like, I get to look back at my child self and be like, guess what we do for a living? We get to be magic for a living now. Like, we manifested that. We did that for ourselves. Sometimes it's hard to like go back and not be mad that I didn't know all this earlier and get a little bit more of a head start. But I think everything does happen when it's supposed to.
I think so too. Yeah, I understand that frustration. I feel it in a lot of different senses, and I know a lot of people do. But yeah, I think you've got to lean into that that divine timing. You know, like Emerson says, that nothing falls too early or too late. It's always on time, almost annoyingly so. It's like, once early, just once, you know, come on, just once early, you know, but it's never late. So you can't complain about that. That's so cool though. I was the same way I had the same attitude. I remember when The Secret came out and I watched it with my cousin in like 2000 and whatever, that early 2000s, whenever that was. And they just oversimplified it. But when I read like reality transurfing and started learning Neville's stuff, which I wasn't previously aware of any of his stuff, I started to really start to understand the process and how it works. You know, when Vadim says, the heart and mind agree, and that brings it to you, it's like so easy to see the fear manifest and how that just comes right into your life, you know, and it's like, oh, but it's the same way. It just needs to be used the opposite sort of direction, right? To beam out and agree and be in alignment first and foremost, right? Back to that presence and relaxation and mindfulness. And then from there, I think things start to unfold a little better instead of just wishing for $1 million in the mail, right? And then I got a check in the mail. Sure you did. Yep.
You know what's funny? I've actually had 3 checks in the mail since I've started doing this.
I've had a couple too, but like if you're just starting out, like don't count on that. You know what I mean?
Right. Like,
it's okay to have a backup plan. It's okay to be a little practical. I have too. Like I've had some very surprising things happen. But that's part of the fun of it too, is that they were surprising, like,
very
really,
surprising.
Really surprising.
though it's what you asked for, it's still a surprise. Like, I think one of the biggest things that's happened to me in the past, like since I've started this, was my move to Sedona. So I started visiting here in December of 2021. I think I came out for that crazy. There was like a Saturn Jupiter solstice configuration. I was like, well, Sedona would be a cool place to go experience that. And I absolutely was transformed by this place. I had been here maybe once when I was 16, but I have very kind of cloudy memories of my childhood because there was a lot of trauma there. So it felt like I was coming back for the first time. And I ended up coming back 3 more times. I ended up inviting a bunch of friends to come experience it with me. I couldn't stop. And then about, I think maybe it was 2 months after my last visit in 2020. No, it was okay. I went in December 2020 and then I moved here in 2021. Sorry, brain. So I was doing a meditation at the house I was living at in San Diego. And all of a sudden, one of the vortex sites, it's called Bell Rock. It's one of my favorite places out there, just shows up in my consciousness. And I don't know how else to describe it, except that it was like, it just went whoop. Like it was like I was looking at a view screen. And I felt something shift. I still don't know what that something was. This is where we could get into talk about Mandela effects again, but something happened. And I came out of the meditation and phoned a friend immediately. And I was like, I don't know what just happened, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be living in Sedona in the next 6 months. And then a week later, I was there. Very, very randomly. Like my timeline was falling apart in San Diego. The living situation was not going great. And I remember just like begging, which is a rare thing for me, but begging my guides for help. I'm like, you got to get me out of here. I have exhausted all options. I don't know what else to do. And then I get a phone call from an Airbnb that I had stayed at in April of that year. So I knew this house already. They had been taken off the Airbnb market and they were now renting out. And they were like, you're the perfect person. Come live with us. And I just packed my bags and I was out the next day. And I've been here ever since, living in my dream spot, working my dream job at the exact place I wanted to work at. There was only one place I wanted to work in Sedona, and I got the interview immediately, and it's just been continuing to grow ever since then. So it's just, even though it's something I wanted, it's something I knew was in my future. To have it happen in the way it did completely blew my mind. And I think about it literally every day.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love the way that it unrolls too, because it certainly is unpredictable. Like you couldn't have drawn up the sequence of events in any direction at all. The random message from an Airbnb you stayed at, and they're like, hey, by the way, we'd love to have you just live here. That's hilarious. Oh my God. So funny.
And what was funny about that too is I'd been practicing a reality transurfing technique I got off of Reality Transurfing TV, the YouTube channel, where she was like, hey, if you feel like you're kind of stuck in a rut or you can't get out of a pattern, do one thing different every day for 30 days. Like take a different road home or buy something at the grocery store you never buy, basically to like fuck up the algorithm, right? Mm-hmm. So I did that for 7 days, and that's how long it took for me to get to Sedona. So I'm actually pretty new to the reality transurfing stuff. Like I dabble in it a little bit, but that stuff is freaking, like it is, that and the 2 cups method are the ones that I think freak me out the most, which is how powerful they are to just take you from point A to point B, literally moving through dimensions, moving through timelines in like an instant.
Yeah, the 2 cup method thing. Yeah, I can attest to that too. And one thing to keep in mind for everybody out there is not to just, without any, don't throw caution to the wind and start doing this kind of stuff. If you're not sure what you want, then give yourself enough time and space to figure out what you do really want. Like sometimes it's really frustrating not to know what you want, but that's okay. That means try things, see what you like, and you figure it out. And that might take some time, but honestly, I think if I could go back into my own journey or whatever, I would really try and experience that in a much more open way and try to just embrace the fact that I didn't know and that I got to try all these cool different things instead of being in some rush. And so I don't know. I just want to throw that out there. Like if I could go back, I would try to just enjoy what they say. It's not the destination, it's the journey. And I think, as cliche, if it's cliche, sometimes it's, there's got to be some truth to it, but yeah, I would encourage people to do that and to really have fun with that process. But then when you do know what you want, do whatever it takes to get to that point, and be honest with yourself. Because like if it is for you, you're going to get it anyway. That whole idea in transurfing, it's real basic, really. I mean, there's no magic to it. It's just like taking the fortress by a lengthy siege, and that's just like I'm set out on this on this path. I've charted this path or whatever, and I'm going to get to that thing, however long it takes. It doesn't matter. And without a whole lot of strain or stress or any of that, just do the process, just do the next thing that you got to do. And it like the process takes care of itself when they say like trust the process or whatever. So anyway, now I'm ranting.
No, but that's so important to mention. Like one of the biggest things I've learned with any of this reality, intentional reality creating or manifesting, two things. One is that I wish more people taught it in a trauma-informed way. Like that 2 months that I spent in an anxiety loop, that was because of some very severe emotional and financial trauma that I had been through. And had somebody told me like, hey, once you start doing this, like if you've spent most of your life dealing with issues of self-worth, but you're trying to manufacture or manifest success, you have to understand that your ego and those programs, those neurotransmitters are going to go bananas because your brain biologically likes consistency. It likes things to be a certain way. So when you challenge that, especially if it's a concept that's opposite to your experience, you're going to come up against some pretty intense stuff. And a lot of shadow work, I think, can be needed to get from point A to point B. So say you've been impoverished your whole life, you've been oppressed, especially this, to back up even further, this is especially important for me to say as someone who teaches this who's white, because like I have a privileged experience based on that, and manifesting certain things for me might intuitively feel easier because I haven't had to push up against systems of oppression that have made it even harder for me to get. So I think in general, when people are teaching conscious creation, we need to have a sort of caution about how we approach it, and just hold space for people to have those dark nights of the soul. If say something doesn't work out and like they feel everybody else can do this but me, or there's so many things stacked up against me, how am I ever going to overcome them? Anybody can do this. Like I've talked to many other BIPOC teachers and shamans and practitioners who would say the same thing. Any person, any sentient being on the planet is manifesting all the time anyway. We're always doing it. We do all, no matter where you live, what your skin color is, your religion, we all have the divine spark to create consciously. It's just a matter of being able to approach it through the lens of compassion, wisdom, mindfulness, like making sure that you're present with what comes up when you try to embody a certain feeling or experience. Like what are the noises? What are the stories that are coming up upon that in that moment? There was a second thing I was going to rant and rave about, but it's gone. It'll come back if it needs to.
Well, I think the self-worth thing is a really, really important point, and the idea of trauma and how those things affect each other and the manifestation, because it's really easy if you don't understand or recognize the story that you've been telling yourself, or whatever the limiting beliefs or what have you, of why you don't deserve a certain thing, or why it's not for you. We have to figure out how to get rid of that stuff and do that shadow work, which sounds cryptic, but it really is about facing the parts of ourselves that we've rejected and healing the traumas that we've kind of had from experiences with other people, and a lot of that programming early on. So healing all of that, it really I think it all comes down to self-worth, all the stuff in the self-help community, ultimately beginning to that point where it's like, oh, okay, I'm allowed I'm allowed to enjoy my life, and I'm allowed to be fulfilled, and I'm allowed to have a purpose or a meaning, or I'm allowed to tell my own story, whatever that is, giving yourself permission. Like, I think that's ultimately the fuel that can push people into really, really consciously manipulating or creating reality for themselves. So I love that. I love that you're working on that too. And I think that was really well put.
I think it's also really cool, like to look at manifestation through the lens of healing in that sense too, because like the more that you're coming in, like you're getting closer to yourself in this process, because you like, even the first question of what do you want? I can't tell you how many people I ask that question to. Some of them almost start crying. like, and you see tears start to show in their eyes, or they start shaking because they're so stressed about even asking that question. Because, you know, they've been told by their parents, society, whatever, that this is what you're supposed to want, this is what you're supposed to have and need, and you're supposed to work really hard for it, and it's supposed to be difficult. And then when you tell somebody, actually, you're allowed to decide what you want. You're allowed to decide how that plays out to a certain extent. You know, we're still human. There's still elements of chaos and all that stuff that show up from time to time. But did you know that it could be easy? Did you know that you don't have to struggle so hard? Like, watching people come to that realization is a healing act in and of itself. And then the further work is to go deeper and deeper into the uncovering of, well, what are the stories I've been telling myself since day one? And it gets even crazier when you look into ancestral stuff, because we do, I think it's like 3 generations back. Like, if, say, we have a great grandfather who, for whatever reason, was like really afraid of lemons, like just had a bad day under a lemon tree, or like had an ex that, like, you know, tried to drown him in a lemonade tank, I don't know. And then you're 4 generations down, 3 generations down, somebody offers you lemonade, and there's like this revulsion to it. So there's not only our stories, but our genetic programming that we're working with through, hopefully, the lens of mindfulness and compassion, to kind of not only heal ourselves, but heal ancestral lines, like heal the entire collective unconscious and conscious. So I think this work is like advertised as a get rich scheme, like get rich quick, like, oh, you want it, just think about it, just put it into the universe. And it's like, yeah, I mean, to a certain point, sometimes that's true. I literally thought it would be fun to just like have somebody Venmo me $1,000 once. I thought that would be fun. I just put that out into the matrix with no intention of ever like looking for it or whatever. And a month later, it happened. It happened it was just completely bewildering. So, but even receiving that it was shadow work for me. Being able to receive the abundance that you're attracting to yourself can be a gateway and a portal into looking at all this stuff. So I wish, again, I guess I think I am seeing it more and more, and I want to keep seeing more and more practitioners teaching people the emotional value of this work. It's not just about having the physical stuff. It's about becoming more evolved as a person, as a spirit.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's the take, you know. It's like, it's cool, right? Like, you can get stuff and, like, you know, date people or whatever. But like, dude, really, it's all about this relationship we have with the self, and like our own experience, and learning to lean into that and trust it, and listen to our intuition and find out what we really want. That's the best part. And I love that. I love that you're doing the work that you're doing, because it's awesome. I really like your approach. It's awesome, man.
Thank you. It's so fun. It's such a privilege to be able to do this work too. And it keeps opening up new doorways for me. Like, it's opened up a pathway for me to practice mediumship, which I guess I've always been able to do, but didn't know that's what it was called. That kind of work has transformed me. And I never would have gotten there without leaning into these manifestation practices of coming forward as somebody who, I don't have like a huge authority over what I'm talking about. I don't think anybody really does, unless, like, I don't have a PhD in this shit. I just have known it as my lived experience for almost 40 years. Real quick, because I'm going to forget this thought if I don't say it now, to come back to tarot a little bit, there's one card in particular that I think of when it comes to conscious manifestation. And it might not be one that other tarot readers agree with me on, but it's the Lovers. The Lovers is number 6, 6 being a number of harmony, of balance, of beauty. It's ruled by Gemini. But to me, like, a lot of people will read the Lovers as a relationship card, which it certainly can be, but it's more about choice. Like, the Lovers is more about how we consciously are choosing things. Am I choosing to stay on the path that I want to be? Am I choosing this or that? I think the most important question the Lovers can ask us is, how are we choosing to relate to reality? When you look at reality, do you see a lover, or do you see an adversary? Do you see a friend or a foe? Like, do you see somebody you have to push up against, or do you see somebody you want to invite home to have dinner with? So if anybody is kind of contemplating getting into tarot and doing a meditation on a card, check out the Lovers and see what that means for you, because I feel like it's fundamentally one of the most important cards in the entire deck.
I love hearing you say that. I'm immediately flashing to Frater Xavier video where it's like Mystery School is, I think it's Mind and Magic is his YouTube channel, but he shows the Lovers card, and I think that's exactly correct, because what he's talking about in that particular card is how the masculine is cueing off the feminine, and the feminine is cueing off the angel. So, the masculine, our conscious mind, can't directly speak to the ether or whatever we want to call that, right? Spirit. But the feminine, that part that's inside of us, that intuition, is directly connected. So the masculine cues off the feminine, and that's how that manifestation's made. So it should be first, something that we internally want, and are connected to. We're all connected to everything anyway. But then that's how the conscious mind would cue off that. I loved his explanation of that, and I think that fits really, really well with what you just demonstrated. That's so funny that you picked that card, because we're kind of the only one that I know anything about. That's just based on what he said, and it made so much sense to me, because I was like, oh yeah, because it's real easy. I think that's where we get thrown off course, and we're like, ooh, shiny, shallow things. That's what the ego is kind of like grasping towards, in this whole idea of manifestation. Whereas the heart wants something that's fulfilling and truly, would make your life a celebration. So the more we can kind of cue off of that internal voice, I think the more we're going to be in alignment, and then start bringing the things into our world that we actually want and will serve us at the same, and other people too, for that matter, right? Like a win-win-win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. I love that explanation of I'm going to have to get so many different links and accounts from you when we're done talking. I feel like there's a whole wellspring of information I'm about to go into a rabbit hole and deep dive into.
Yeah, I am a nerd. I've been nerding out for a long, long time. And likewise, because the correspondence thing is something that I see over and over and over and over again. And so it's like, the more times things are confirmed, it's kind of like having that intuitive voice confirmed, in a reading or something like that, and then over and over and over and over again. And I think that just kind of helps us really, fine tune our process and hear a little bit more clearly. But yeah, oh my gosh. Well, we could probably do this for a long, long time, and perhaps we'll do something a little bit different. If you have some ideas, I'll be thinking of some stuff too. Maybe we could do like a live reading together at some point, do something fun like that. I'd love to do something like that. But I thought we'd get in here and introduce and get a good idea of each other and all that good stuff, and start there. And I just want to thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And please let us all know where we can find you, and I'll be sure to include every single link underneath inside the video and on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is great conversation. If you want to find me, it's a link tree. It's linktr.ee/Femme Faetale Tarot, with a crazy long spelling. If you want me to spell, I'm happy to.
No. I will make sure the link is available, and I'll copy and paste it so I don't misspell it.
When I was like deciding on a business name, I kind of went for more like, oh my God, this sounds badass, to functional. So that's why it's a little on the long side. But anyway, thank you so much, Bootsy. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Nim. Everybody, go and check Nim's stuff out at Femme Faetale Tarot on Instagram, TikTok, and Patreon. I'll put all the links in the show notes. She's got workshops, tutoring, all that good stuff. So check it all out, and we will definitely be back in touch, and we'll do something cool together. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.